why don't we start off with a moment of prayer? So if you would please join me in prayer. Gracious God, we thank you. We thank you for gathering us, and we thank you that you have called us to be your people. As we gather for the business of this meeting to talk about and hear Reverend Jarrod's experiences and thoughts on merger, God, we pray that you would be present with us and give us the wisdom and the ears to hear what's happening and to have open minds and open hearts in this process as we continue to explore what it means to be your church and what it means to be your church in this time and in this place as we look to transform ourselves to be more effective for your mission and for your kingdom. So, God, I want to thank everybody who is gathered here and for the people who will watch this recording later. Bless the business in front of us, bless our fellowship time, and bless our hearts and minds in our mission. God, we pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I would like to introduce, if you can't see him, Reverend Jarrod Severing, who is the lead pastor at Journey of Hope United Methodist Church in Elgin. Reverend Severing has done 2 mergers, right, so far?
Yes.
You haven't, that hasn't upped yet. They haven't given you another one yet.
No.
Yet. Okay. Has gone through and has been a resource. I'm pretty sure that Pastor Michael has talked to him. I've talked to him. I believe Pastor Joe Johnson has talked to him. He seems to be sort of the go-to guy for the district when you want to know about mergers. He rapidly becoming the center of excellence on this topic. And so I thought it was good. So most of, we're not going to go around and introduce everybody in the interest of time, but basically the people that are on this meeting that I invited have some vested interest in understanding the administrative aspects of a merger. So that is the aspects from the United Methodist Church as it's laid out in the Book of Discipline, the considerations the conference puts on, and then also from the state of Illinois in terms of what has to happen in a church merger, and then from the dimensions of finances and staff and building and all those things. And so I invited, I think that this would be a good time for us to meet, and we can always ask Pastor Jarrod to join us again. But I thought that this was we're in a good spot right now as we're starting to move forward in the 2 different merger efforts that I'm involved in, to start hearing about Pastor Jarrod's experiences and things like that. Beyond that, I don't have much of an agenda. I would ask you, if you are not speaking, to go ahead and mute yourselves. But I think that we can take questions as they come up, or you can hold them to the end and see if they get asked or answered. But other than that, I think I will turn the floor over to Pastor Jarrod and let him talk about what he's been doing and his thoughts, and we can go from there. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Jarrod Jim. So let me begin by really kind of expressing to you that that while there has been in the past this idea that merges happen a certain way, that there's a particular way that you do them, like a vital merger or a standard merger. There is no standard merger that I've run across. I think it is contextual. So each church, as they get together with other churches, will kind of determine what direction they go. And so let me begin with that, but then let me just quickly express kind of the history of Journey of Hope. Because Journey of Hope, I started at Epworth United Methodist Church in Elgin in August of 2019. And by May of 2020, which you will also recognize as being the year that everybody wants to forget, that's the COVID year, we actually merged Epworth United Methodist and Wesley United Methodist churches in Elgin in more of a vital standard type merger. Vital merger, if you're not familiar with that, vital mergers are taking two different churches, bringing them together, selling off all of your property, buying and worshiping in a new space with a new pastor, and really kind of having this new church start. Uh, that always sounded great until everybody started trying to realize, how can we sell all of our buildings? Because church properties just don't sell. Uh, we've gotten really lucky with the old Wesley building, but under normal circumstances, church properties sit for quite some time before they sell. So this idea of a vital merger became more of a hindrance for us. And so what we did was we brought two churches together. We merged them in 2020. And when we merged them, we started worshiping at the Epworth campus, which is the campus right here on the corner of Highland and Randall Road. It's a bigger building, larger parking lot. Obviously, it made a lot more sense. Also, the conference really didn't want to give up the building because it was a really nice building in a good location. Uh, and so immediately when we got together as a merger team, we decided what we needed to do was we needed to work on selling one of the properties. And so we sold the parsonage and we sold the church building from the Wesley campus. Well, almost. We're getting ready to close on it in August of this year. But that's kind of what we did. We did this hybrid vital merger. So it wasn't a cookie cutter cutout form of how to create that merger. It was, we took bits and pieces from different mergers. We got together, we decided that we could not be called Wesley UMC and we could not be called Epworth UMC. We decided that we needed to have a new name. It was a new church, it was a new church start. And so we needed this new name, which offered a lot of excitement, a lot of freshness within the community. And so we we spitballed about 90 different names to come up with the name that we have now. It turns out that we narrowed it down from 90 different names down to two. And the two names were Journey Church or Living Hope. And my wife, in a sheer stroke of the Spirit speaking through her, said, have you thought about combining the two names? She goes, what about Journey of Hope? And immediately we realized that was the name that God was leading us to use. And so we had a new name. We had new branding, new logo, new colors, we tried to change as much as we possibly could to reflect this new church start. However, one of the other things that we realized is that we were bringing together two churches with a very long history, which means churches have history, churches have traditions, and those are not easy things to let go of. And so what we did was we tried to make compromises along the way, and try to bring in both congregations within the same building so that they all felt at home. So if you look in our sanctuary today, what you will find is the sanctuary, obviously we're worshiping in the old Epworth building, but the altar that we have in the Epworth building is the Wesley altar. And so we tried to bring pieces from the Wesley church into the church, into the Epworth church, so that we can combine the two. That was kind of the way we went. We found some new excitement. We found some new growth that was coming because people were reaching out and inviting previous members to come back. They were inviting friends to come. And so we started to see natural growth come out of that. And then we received another call. And that call was to look towards the Good Shepherd United Methodist Church in Bartlett. This came in the midst of our discerning starting something new, which would have been either a new worship service, a new campus, an online digital presence. We knew we needed to start something. And so when the conversation started coming up with Bartlett, we realized that this is God leading in another direction. However, with the Bartlett merger was not a vital merger. It was not a standard merger. It was more an adoptive merge. And so basically what we did was we adopted Good Shepherd. Good Shepherd then became Journey of Hope, but they kept the location. And so now we are basically one church with multiple campuses. We merged the two together at the end of June of this past year. We closed the church building down in Bartlett for renovations. But even if we hadn't done the renovations, we still would have closed the building down for a couple of months. Part of that is to build excitement again into something new. But in the midst of that process, we took out the pews in the sanctuary, we repainted, we updated a lot of the AV that was within in the church. We put in chairs, new carpeting, and relaunched 2 months later, the beginning of September, as Journey of Hope. We relaunched it well, let me say this. So Good Shepherd was averaging about 15 people in worship. On the relaunch Sunday, now granted, some of these were from members from the Elgin campus that came down and worshiped. They came down and we had over 100 people for the first relaunch Sunday. Since then, we have been averaging 30 people in worships. And so we've already doubled the attendance, and people are coming back. They're inviting friends again. And so natural growth is happening. But it was a different type of merge. So it wasn't, like I said, a standard merge. It was an adoptive merge where we kept two different buildings. That is not always the case. A lot of times when churches are merging, it has something to do with financial resources, people resources, and so keeping two buildings is not feasible. And so sometimes that's is one of the main drivers for merging churches together. However, I think what I would like to do is kind of reframe that, thinking about mergers, not in the sense where I know that a number of churches are in this particular position where they notice that numbers are the Sunday morning attendance is slipping. They realize that the finances aren't there to maintain the building to keep going forward. And so they're looking at this merge out of necessity. But I wondered if when churches start talking about merging, they start looking at it from a different lens. And it's not the lens of, okay, we need to do this so that we can continue to go on as long as we can. But hey, we need to do this so that we can reach new people. One of the things that I continue to talk about within Journey of Hope is I keep telling them that we need to think about our lives in abundance and not in scarcity. And that is a really hard shift for people to think because of where Epworth and Wesley was at the time of the merge. They were looking at a space where they thought, hey, we have maybe 2 years left. And if we don't do anything in 2 years, we're not going to be here. So they continue to think of this life in a church in scarcity and not necessarily in abundance. But now we've kind of shifted that. We've really kind of made a point to talk about that quite often, of saying, hey, let's say, God is going to bless this. God is going to bless what we're doing. So let's just act as if God is going to bless us because we know that he will. And so it's changing our mentality into abundance. That is kind of a quick overview of the two different merges that I've been involved with. I know that there are a number of questions about processes, legal terms, and what actually has to be done. And so I've gone through it. I went through, like I said, these two. I had a local attorney who thankfully was a member of the Epworth Church. He used to be a conference attorney for the Northern Illinois Conference, Dave Ackerman. Dave Ackerman is also a retired Kane County judge. And so he graciously offered to kind of walk us through and to fill out all the paperwork. I do have some paperwork that I can send over that I will. In fact, I had just received one as I was looking through my files this afternoon. That was kind of a memo from him, which pulled in all of the items from the Book of Discipline. That was saying, okay, so here's what's required of a church as they get ready to merge. Uh, and when you actually look at the Book of Discipline, however, you kind of look at it and go, there's not much there. They don't give you a whole lot of guidance as to what is required. Let me say this though, and that is that there is always something that's going to come up in a merger, it seems. When we merged with Good Shepherd, as we went through and we did a title search of the property, we found that we had a $10,000 lien from the Global Board of Missions. Now, the Global Board of Missions didn't know that we had this $10,000 lien on the property. Because when we contacted them, they first of all asked, well, how did you find out? Well, we did a title search and there it was. I tried to get the president of the global missions to allow us to make a $10,000 donation to a mission globally. We actually wanted to give 10,000 to Grace International School. And I thought, well, if we could just give them 10,000, would you wipe off the lien? And they said, well, we can't do that. So he says one of the things, our two options were, one, pay Global Missions 10,000 and they'll take care of the lien, or two, just leave it. And I said, so when do we have to pay that back? And the requirement from Global Missions was the only time you have to pay that back is if you decide to sell the building, and then you would have to pay it. So I said, we don't have any plans of selling the building. And he says, well, then just hold on to it, and wait until that time comes. But I'm saying that to at least let everybody know that there's always some little thing that you're going to find in the midst of title searches, of going back through paperwork, and trying to figure out what the legal status of the church is, and how you need to move forward. We found out that between between Wesley and Epworth, one was listed with the state of Illinois as a not-for-profit, and the other was listed as a religious organization. And there is a difference in how the votes are taken between those two, because if you're listed as a not-for-profit, you need to follow the state of Illinois not-for-profit guidelines. The religious organization isn't quite as stringent. But I do have, oh, pardon me, I do have a copy of the not-for-profit ordinance through the state of Illinois that I can also send over, so that you would have that. Because what we found out was that you needed to have 2/3 vote by the church bodies to approve the merge. But in one instance, we needed 2/3 of all voting members. Now, what this means is that all of your voting members, and that is whether or not they're present or not, if they are a member listed on your rolls in the church, they are counted as a member. And a lot of times, if they don't vote, a non-vote counts as a no vote. And so when we looked at the two churches, we looked at one and said, well, man, there's 320 odd members, but they're worshiping 20. So we have to get 320 some odd people to vote in order to approve this merge. And if they don't vote, if they say, we haven't been members for there forever, it seems, we're not going to worry about that. The non-vote would have counted at a no vote, which would have made things very difficult. So we made an effort to clean up a lot of the membership to try to help alleviate that. The other piece that came in was obviously that was right around 2020, and we said, how can we do this? Can we do this by proxy ballot, or do they have to be in-person ballots? And while the United Methodist Church does not necessarily like proxy ballots, the state of Illinois for the not-for-profit agencies will allow proxy ballots. So there was a conversation when we did our second merge, because Jeffrey Bross came in and we had some proxy ballots that came in, but everybody else was in-house. And the problem with doing a proxy ballot and the in-person ballots is that those who vote by proxy have already cast their ballot without even listening to any of the discussions that happen during that time of the vote. And that was why Jeffrey was concerned that we would be taking proxy ballots and not just the in-person ones. But that's all written, like I said, that's all written down in some of these documents that I can send over to you so that you can see those. The other piece is timing, because voting has to happen at a number of different places. The final vote, and this is how we did this adoptive merge vote, was we figured out when it was that we actually wanted to vote for the actual merger, because that is a church conference vote. That is all the members of the church. You set the date for that, and then you have to back up 20 days because you need 20 days notice for a church conference. The church conference is the one that votes on the actual merger document, says, yes, we want to merge, or no, we don't want to merge. You also have to have a charge conference vote that votes to approve the merger documents, not the merger, but just the documents. And the charge conference is basically your church council, your ad board. And that one, you need 10 days prior notice before the vote. And so you kind of back the dates up as you move along. So you have to have your documents ready. You bring them to a charge conference. They vote to approve the documents. And then those documents go to the church conference. And then the church conference votes to do that. There's a question on here. Is a religious organization a subset of the nonprofit category or different categories? They actually, I believe, they're actually two categories. So you can be a not-for-profit or you can be a religious organization. There was a push back in the 90s for churches to turn themselves into not-for-profits. Many churches did that. However, also many churches did not keep up with it. So you can change yourself to a not-for-profit status, but every year you have to file paperwork to maintain that not-for-profit status. And so you may have filed it once, but then if you did not keep up with it, you might have slipped into more of just the religious organization or an unaffiliated organization. So it would be good to contact the state of Illinois and find out what status you actually are within the state of Illinois.
So we are actually at Calvary a nonprofit. I have the paperwork and I'm the
Okay.
one who files the annual report. So we are up to date. We are filed every year. So we definitely, and we have our own EIN number.
Okay,
That is
perfect.
not related to like the conference. And part of that might be because we were originally EUB, not Methodist, before the merger.
Okay.
So they might have, had that might be why they're not part of the conference EIN.
That could be, or I mean, when you file for not-for-profit status, you should have your EIN number as
Yeah,
an
we do.
organization.
We do.
Okay. But yeah, it would be good to know where you're at, what the status is, so that you know how to proceed forward, especially knowing that early. Because if you need to change the status, it's a lot easier to merge two churches that are the same. So, both churches that are not-for-profits or both churches that are religious organizations. There's some weird things that happen if one is a religious organization, one is a not-for-profit. So it's easy to, which is actually what we did with Wesley. Wesley was a religious organization and Epworth was a not-for-profit. And so we actually filed paperwork to change Wesley's status to a not-for-profit so that we could merge the two together. The other thing, as far as, you know, talking about legal things is one thing, and then talking about some of the administrative things, because I think one of the questions, somebody had brought up a question, and I think it was in this email. Yeah. As far as looking at like staffing, and other administrative things, and how you actually go through and piece things together. Some of the things that I kind of learned along the way is the first merge that we did, we decided that we were going to take all of our staff and combine the staff. So we had 2 office administrators, we had 2 organists, technically 2 choir directors, although one was more of a handbell and didn't do much with choirs. Custodians didn't bother us much because the one custodian from Wesley actually moved out of state. But we basically brought everybody together and kept everybody's positions. We did the same thing with the Good Shepherd adopted merge, but part of the piece that helps with that was we had a second location, and so we needed an admin in that location. We needed a custodian. We needed music people in the second location, so that made more sense. When we did the first one, bringing everybody into one church, while it made it nice because we kept everyone, it created some headaches, to be completely honest. You know, I originally thought, hey, this will be wonderful. Everybody will come in, everybody will be happy, everybody will have a job, and then realized, oh, maybe we should have thought about this a little more. So that would probably be something that I would do differently the next time. Having earlier conversations with staff as far as, you know, what positions are actually needed, and whether or not we can continue to have all of the staff or if we need to cut back. And so I would encourage you to look at that. The other piece is church leadership itself. So church leadership, when you're looking at bringing 2 churches together, you're talking about 2 different church councils, 2 trustees, 2 finance, 2 SPRC. And what we found that has worked the best has been to sandwich all the teams together. And so take your 2 finance teams and make one big finance team. The only thing that you might run into a problem with would be trustees, because trustees, you're only supposed to have 9 on there. So you may actually have more than that. We had more for a little bit, but we temporarily said, we're bringing everybody together, and now we can reallocate people with their passions and their gifts. Because we had, well, for one example, in our finance team, when we merged Good Shepherd and into Journey of Hope, we had a member who was on finance whose passion was missions. But they needed him on finance, and so he couldn't spend as much time as he wanted to on missions work. Well, as soon as we merged together, he says, can I come off of finance? I'd like to just focus on mission. Yes, go where your passion is, because then I know that that you're going to be far more beneficial to us there than you will just filling a spot on a different committee. But we would do that. We would bring the teams together, go for about a year, 6 months to a year, depending on how the cycle works and when the merge happens, and then work on narrowing those teams down. But at least having representations from both churches on all of those committees and teams.
Hi, this is
yeah.
Glenn Nystrom. I got a question for you on the adoptive church at Bartlett, I guess it was. How did they attend services? They didn't have an active minister there. Did they just watch your services at the other church through video, or how did they?
Are you talking about after the merge?
Well, yeah, yes. When they're, you said they were an adopted church.
Yes.
So they were part of your church, but they still went to their church in Bartlett.
Yes, yeah, because actually, so just prior to the merge, they had a part-time pastor. Pastor was a student at Garrett. And so when we merged, the churches together, like I said, the end of June, we closed the building down for 2 months while we did the renovations. When we relaunched, I actually commuted the difference between the two. So I preached in Elgin at 9. And then as soon as worship got over, I drove down to Bartlett and then worshiped in Bartlett at 10:30. Now, Bartlett's 20 minutes away. And so that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room in between there. So there were Sundays that I had people finish the service in Elgin, and there were Sundays that I had people start the service in Bartlett. We currently now have we call him a campus leader. His name is Jason Princer. So we hired basically an associate. We can't call him an associate because he's not ordained and he's not licensed. However, he is moving in that direction. He actually was an ordained elder in the Iowa Annual Conference. And so he's working back through that. But we did hire somebody to cover the Bartlett campus. So now he is there Sundays to lead worship in Bartlett on the first, third, fourth, and fifth Sundays. And then he's in Elgin on the second Sunday. So that we're kind of keeping his face in front of people up in Elgin as well. And so I am preaching in Elgin on the first, third, fourth, and fifth. And then I go down to Bartlett and serve communion on the second Sunday of the month. And so then I'm down in Bartlett for at least one Sunday. I also do a midweek service down in the Bartlett campus as well. But yeah, so we hired somebody to be able to do that. He also works 1 day a week. He works on Thursdays in the Bartlett area, and then he works in the evenings at times just doing sermon prep.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and the idea was with the adoptive merge was the focus has always been to try to do one church, multiple locations. Because there are a number of other merges that have happened and adoptive merges. In fact, even there are adoptive merges that you might even be familiar with, where it seems like you have the parent church, and then you have the redheaded stepchild. You have the church that feels like they're just left out. And so what we've tried to do is continue to emphasize that we are one church in multiple locations, and which is also why I'm doing kind of the flip-flop on certain Sundays to try to make sure that we maintain that, as well as trying to maintain the cohesiveness of the two congregations and trying to do multiple events at either location. You know, whether or not we do a special event in Elgin or do a special event in the Bartlett campus, we try to do that. I see a hand.
That's us over here.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Hey, Jared, Tom Price at FUMC. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Would you just reiterate again for me or for us, charge conference versus church conference? Who's voting on what?
Charge conference, there's been a whole lot of confusion around that because I think the annual conference has used those terms interchangeably. But if you really look back into the Book of Discipline and you start to understand what the difference is, the charge conference is the leadership of the church, which usually means it's the church council. Predominantly, that's what it's been. Some churches have gone to a single board model, and a single board model, that is their charge conference too. It is the leadership of the church. The church conference is the body. It is the church membership, the church as a whole. And so every year we have our annual church conference. Although I know that even in my home church, we always called it the annual charge conference, but it technically is a church conference because the entire church body gets to vote.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, other questions and things, and like I said, I know that in fact, I need to send those documents. It'd probably be easiest if I send them to Jim and to Michael And should I send them to someone else?
You know what, if you send them to me, Jared, I'll make sure that everybody that was invited,
Okay,
because
because
the
I've got,
meeting's
I've got a
recorded.
number of documents that,
Okay.
that
All
could
right.
help.
Good question. One more question. Jared,
Yeah.
can you clarify? So you're going to be selling the Wesley building in August, closing on that.
Yes.
Those funds can then be used for your salary, right?
No, they cannot. In fact, but here's the other thing that I want to bring up with that, especially with selling property, because it will probably come up in annual conference, because I don't know that it has been fully voted on and passed. But there were conversations around any church property that is sold, that a tithe of that property would go to the kind of the code red team, which is congregational development and redevelopment. And so a tithe, basically 10%, would go to that team to be reallocated to new church starts, to helping churches that are struggling. But it would be reallocated then back into the conference in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if that has passed yet. I don't believe it has. I think there's just been conversation about it, but that may be coming up in annual conference this year. However, if you sell a church property, the funds that come from selling a church property are capital funds. So they can only be used for capital projects. What we did was we ended up selling the parsonage from the Wesley building. We cleared it with the district superintendent, who was Darneather at the time, and then also the conference trustees, to let them know that when we sold that particular property, we were going to pay down our mortgage. So we're going to pay down the principal on the mortgage, which can be considered capital. The mortgage that we are paying, which we are still actually paying, we got a little bit left on it, is through the Red Door Fund. And I'm not sure if many of you are aware of the Red Door Fund, but the Red Door Fund is a fund that the annual conference picked up. They actually they took out a big mortgage and borrowed money so that they could allocate it to churches that were having a difficult time getting a mortgage. And so the annual conference then basically became the mortgage lessee. And so we owed a certain amount of money to the annual conference's Red Door Fund. Now, when we paid roughly $220,000 down on our mortgage 2.5 years ago, that money went back to the Red Door Fund, which meant that they could then reallocate that and send that back into the conference as another mortgage to another church that needed it. And so that's what we did. The proceeds from the sale of the church building that we are going to have in August, part of that is going to be to continue to pay, or to actually finish paying off the mortgage. And then we also have a very large parking lot issue. And so the parking lot is definitely capital. We are going to resurface the other 3 lots that we have that are surrounding our building. But we've also told our district superintendent, and we also told the building or the conference trustees that this is what we are doing. This is our plan. This is what we're doing with it. So keeping them abreast on what's happening, because there have been stories of, and I don't know if it's been in Northern Illinois, I think it might have been in other annual conferences, where the annual conference said, oh no, you're selling a building. In the book of discipline, the sale of a building goes to the annual conference. And I went, well, technically, if it's a merge between 2 churches, then it's the merged church is the one who has the property. So it's not like if it was a church closure, different story. If it's a church closure, then the sale of the property goes to the annual conference, but not in a merger process. So that's what we've done that way. The other thing I will say is if anybody has the idea, this is what we did, and I don't recommend it, is we sold our building, the Wesley Church building, we sold it on seller financing. We talked with Lonnie Chafin. There were a couple of churches that were interested in buying it, and they were asking for seller financing. We did. The church that we ended up selling it to did not ask for seller financing, but against my wishes, we offered the same offer to all three churches. And the one who actually bought it said, yes, we'll take that seller financing. And so basically it was 2 years, 5% interest. And so they're making a monthly payment of a little over $3,000 a month. And part of that is capital, part of that is interest. So the part that comes in as capital goes into our capital reserve account. The interest then goes to the general budget. But at the end of the 2 years, there's a balloon payment. I tried to reach out to the buyer's attorney, had our attorney try to reach out to them and say, look, 2 years ago, you know where the interest rate was. You know, I said, you're not guaranteed that the interest rate is going to stay there. And as soon as they went on seller financing, the interest rate started to climb. Now it hasn't gone up that much, but it's gone up quite a bit. And that much on a $300,000 to $400,000 mortgage makes a pretty big difference. So we're crossing our fingers that August comes and the balloon payment is due, that they're able to find the financing to pay the rest of it, or have already saved up the money to pay it. So other questions?
So Jared, you took this opportunity, I think, in the merger to, like you said, in the first case, to quote, launch a new church, right? To look at the ministries. And then when you brought in the Bartlett Church, it was more of an adoption. And so I'm assuming that you're trying to share that kind of mission DNA with the adopted church.
Yes. So when we merged Wesley and Epworth together, one of the biggest focuses that we had was not only on, you know, this new name, this new church start, basically, but it was like, let's find out. So what is our mission? What is our vision? And how do we then get that out in the community? So we name our mission and our vision down in 3 words, and it's belonging, changing, and sharing. And so how do we do that? We offer space that's belonging for everybody to come. We offer a space where you can change your life, to transform it. And then we also offer a way that we can encourage you to share that message with others around you. And so that's been kind of our DNA as Journey of Hope. So then when Bartlett joined, we didn't create a new mission for the Bartlett campus. We said, this is our vision, this is our mission. How do we live that out in the Bartlett community? And so, yeah, one of the biggest things I think that churches should focus on as they come together is that mission and vision. What exactly are we, you know, why are we merging? And how can we make this a benefit to the kingdom of God? You know, instead of like, and this is kind of where I started, it's not that idea of, it's like, well, gosh, we got 2 years left. If we merge together, maybe we'll get 4. You know, it's not prolonging the inevitable. It's saying, what can we do if we come together? What can we do in our communities by reaching out? You know, how do we make a bigger impact if we were able to come together?
Now, did you encounter any resistance from sort of the people that wanted to keep the church the way it was?
Yes, there has always been, you know, a certain few that, you know, this is my church and we're not going to change. And the worst part about it is obviously when you're doing the merge with 2 and you're coming together and one church is coming over to the other one, they're losing their building. They're losing a lot of the history. They're losing a lot of what they feel is a lot of the tradition. And so there is a lot of grief that happens with that. And so you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of this pain and loss that's going to come in, which is why we tried to bring as much as we could from the Wesley congregation into the building at Epworth, so that we could kind of ease that. But yes, you are going to have this sense of loss. And how do you make it feel like everyone is part of this? You know, it took us, and there are days when I still see it, but it took us it took us a year and a half or so before we got everybody kind of on the same page of saying, this is Journey of Hope. This is our church. You know, this isn't, oh, this is old Wesley people. Oh, this is old Epworth people. You know, it's like, there's times when you want to reminisce and you want to maintain some of those things that have been happening forever, but then there's other times where it's like, no, we should all come together and try to do something new, and try to foster that within the congregations, because yeah, it's difficult. There's a book out there. There's a book out there called Sacred Cows Make Gourmet Burgers. I don't necessarily recommend that, because sometimes that's just like pushing your way through certain things. And I think it needs to be a community effort as you go through. I see two hands. I know Michael Mann had his hand up, and then there's another one who, if I
John.
hover over, John, that is
Yeah. What about memorial gardens? What needs to be done on those?
Memorial gardens. So you've got, you're talking about, let's say from a church, as you merge two together and you're going to go over to one church building, you got one church building that's left behind that has memorial
Right.
gardens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have to face that at all, or do you have any suggestions?
You know, honestly, we really didn't. I'm trying to think if there, I mean, the altar was not a memorial, but it was created by one of the members. So there was a,
I
but
think some people have their ashes there.
oh,
Oh, yes.
that type of memorial garden.
Yes.
There, we did not have to deal with that at all. I believe that that obviously there's something with the state, with the legal ramifications of maintaining those types of gardens, especially when you're talking about cemeteries, graveyards. I'm not sure if you're talking about somebody that just had their ashes sprinkled.
Ashes.
Yeah. I think that would warrant a much longer discussion.
Okay.
You know, especially with the families that are involved, just so that they don't feel like you're brushing it off and you're saying, you know, we're not going to worry about it. But to really have those conversations, because you know, depending on where you're at, I mean, at some point churches close, and so how does that happen when a church closes as well? But that's a really good question. Michael, oh, he took his hand down, or?
Hi, Eric Heyman with First here.
Hey, Eric.
At the beginning, you alluded to the fact that your new church that you guys formed wanted to look at its own space, but then due to the fact that the property selling and other things prohibited, is that what I gathered correctly? Was
Not fully. So what I was trying to express, there's a book out there by Dirk Elliott. Dirk Elliott is a congregational development in the Michigan Annual Conference, and he wrote a book called Vital Merger. And that was his plan of a vital merger, was taking two churches, coming together, building something new or going somewhere new, and selling off all the old property. Our problem that we had was that, first of all, the conference really liked the building where Epworth is, where Journey of Hope is right now in Elgin. It's a decent sized building in a very good location. And so we knew that it wasn't going to be feasible for us to move from there. We probably could have sold that building pretty simply. We had a number of other people. In fact, there are times, well, it stopped about a year and a half ago, but a year and a half, 2 years ago, we would still get people that would call up and ask if our building was for sale. And so we had people that actually wanted to buy it, but it was, I mean, it is in a very prime location.
because right now with one of our buildings, we're having a lot of maintenance issues.
Mhm.
And was that something that you guys had to deal with your merger, or what is your building in okay shape where that wasn't a huge process?
It's interesting because we did have a lot of discussion. Our trustees got together and talked about the two buildings. because it was kind of looking at, so what needs the most maintenance? Is there one that is far superior to the other? And the Wesley Church actually didn't need as much maintenance. It was a smaller building, but it didn't need as much maintenance, but it had no parking. And so we would have to do a lot of street parking, and it just wasn't going to work out. But I think that's another big key aspect of taking two churches and looking at them and deciding, okay, so what building do we move into? So if you're looking at two different churches and you're saying, okay, well, we have to pick one, what church do we move into? I think there needs to be a number of different categories that you look at. One, location. What's the location like? How's the parking? And I think you're right. I think you're right in looking at what is the maintenance? What is the condition of the building? If one building needs all new heating and cooling and it needs a new roof, then what does the other building look like? And if it's close, then why would you want to move into something that you are going to have to put, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 into when you've got another one that doesn't need all of that? So I think that's a good conversation to have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever any consideration to making Wesley a campus instead of selling it off?
It was really close. I mean, I'm sorry, it wasn't really close in making it a campus. It was really close physically. So the Wesley building and the Epworth building were probably 5 minutes away from each other. Elgin has First UMC downtown. It had Wesley on South Street, Epworth on Highland, Community in South Elgin, Cornerstone out in Plato Center. There are so many Methodist churches in a really tight-knit area that it was really kind of interesting to look at it and go, well, if we're going to merge the two together, yeah, I don't know that having it that close would have worked. The Bartlett being 20 minutes away works perfectly. It's far enough away that it's far enough away that you can have those two separate worship services, but yet close enough that we actually have people that cross both ways. We've got one family that just moved to Carroll Stream, and they drive right by the Bartlett campus to come up to Elgin. And so they said, well, hey, on days when the weather's bad, we're going to Bartlett. And I've got another couple that lives off of Bowes Creek that used to go down to Bartlett that are now coming up to the Elgin campus. And I said, that's fine. There's some that are in Gilbert's that drive right by Elgin. And so they'll now come and worship at the Elgin campus. There has been talk about trying to do more with the multi-site of trying to do more of the, let's do a combined worship service. And a lot of people are like, that's great. We loved it. When we closed Bartlett down for the 2 months and all of the Bartlett campus people came up to Elgin and worship, well, most of them did. Some of them just worshiped online with us. They loved it. They got to know people at the Elgin campus, and it was really working out well. And so they said, can we continue to do that? And I said, I would love to, but there's a problem with that. On any given Sunday, Elgin has a half a dozen or so guests and visitors. And now Bartlett is kind of going the same way. They're starting to get 2, 3, and 4 visitors a Sunday. And I said, so if we decide on a given Sunday that we're going to all worship in Elgin, then anybody who's a guest that shows up in Bartlett goes, oh, there's no church. Did the church close down? What happened? And then if we do the same thing, if Elgin goes down to Bartlett, then the guests come in and they go, oh, I didn't realize the church closed today.
Hey, Pastor. I've got one
yeah.
more. Go ahead. Are we on?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, Jarrod, Tom again at FUMC. Very, very intrigued and love your mission vision that you guys came up with. We've done some visioning here at FUMC, small groups and whatnot, but did you have any specific type of a planning process or strategic process that you went through with the membership of both churches to kind of build that plan and come up with that vision mission?
I don't know that we had an organized plan to create that vision. We sat together as merger teams. And so we brought a group from Wesley and a group from Epworth together. And we sat down in merger team meetings, kind of plotting out the necessary steps that we needed to take, as well as having discussions around staffing and around worship times and stuff like that. But then when we started talking about the name and the mission, that's when we just kind of had these conversations about, well, what exactly do we want? What do we want as our mission? Now, our mission really is the mission of the United Methodist Church. It's basically to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. The vision that we have is how do we actually do that? And so we just had a lot of conversations around it, and we had people that took down notes of what they heard, and then we kind of combined them together, and I heard these 3 words coming out, and so we kind of fleshed out what it would look like to create a vision around that, and we did some wordsmithing around it. But yeah, I don't know that there was an organized way that we did that. More just kind of scattered. Let's get together and talk about it and see what fleshes out.
Great, thank you.
Hey, we got a question from Bensenville.
Yes.
With regard to the Bartlett Adoptive Church, you mentioned that you still maintain separate administrative staff. What other things were combined, or is it just a minister who visits the Bartlett's church?
So yes, we have an office admin that is down there 2.5 days a week. We have the hired campus lead who's there a couple of days a week and leads worship, all but one Sunday a month. We also have worship musicians, and so we have an organist and a keyboardist, as well as one of them leads handbells and worship team. And so it almost acts as a separate site altogether. It's fully functional without necessarily the need of the Elgin campus. However, we do all of our planning together. And so both campuses do the same sermon series. We're on the middle of a sermon series from Adam Hamilton called Wrestling with Doubt. And so we're both on the same topics each and every Sunday. And that way, like this past Sunday, we talked about scripture and doubt around scripture. Well, Jason brought his message up to Elgin, and I took mine down to Bartlett, but it's the same message. So we're all writing the same for any given Sunday.
With regard to committees and finances, are those still all separate, or are they combined with the other, with Journey of Hope?
They are combined. So it is we have one set of meetings. And so our finance, so far Trustees is the only one that has not done this, but at Ad Council, Finance, SPRC, we all rotate back and forth between the Bartlett campus and the Elgin campus. So one month we'll meet in Elgin, and the next month we'll meet down in Bartlett.
So basically all your finances are combined and all your committee work is combined also.
Yes. Yes, we're looking right now. So since we merged in the middle of the year last year, our balance sheet and our, with, I guess, the worst way to call it, a profit and loss statement, because it really isn't that, but those 2 reports, now going into this next year, we are actually going to have the Bartlett campus and the Elgin campus designated. It's still going to be on the same report, but this way we can kind of take a look at the finances from both to see, okay, are there some things that we need to be aware of? So, is the income rising in the Bartlett campus? Are the expenses going through the roof in Bartlett? How do we address things on a monthly basis, knowing where the finances are? But yeah, I mean, they're all the same team.
Okay.
I'd love to, over the next year or 2, I would love to move towards to a single board. But obviously coming right out of a merger is not the time to do something like that. There's only so much change you can do.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So how did, I mean, the Wesley Upworth thing makes sense, right? Geographically and it's both
Mhm.
Elgin, but who approached? Bartlett approached you guys or you guys, how did that?
Bartlett approached Code Red. Now, if I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
No,
Code Red is, it's a committee, it's a congregational development and redevelopment. And so it's a committee that is headed up by Martin Lee. And there's a lot of conversations that happen around different churches that are struggling. What can we do to help? I think what's happening now is there's a lot of churches now that are going, hey, we don't need Code Red, we don't need congregational development. We're going to enter into these conversations on our own. Bartlett, however, reached out to Code Red and said, hey, we see the writing on the wall. We know that we only have a few years left because we're already pulling from our general budget to make basically soft expenses. And so we need to do something. And so we had a conversation. We had basically a meeting of said, what's your current reality? What are your hopes and dreams? And so Code Red met with them. I'm actually on Code Red, so I was there when we met. But then what happened is that Code Red didn't jump all over it right away. It sat for a little bit. But in the meantime, I had already had a conversation with our church leadership. We did a what they call a CAT survey, which is a congregational assessment tool. It was a survey that the entire church took that told us that we were in a position that we needed to expand. We just didn't know what that meant. And so when I heard about Bartlett, I went, well, man, maybe that's the ticket. Maybe that's what we really need to look at. And so when Bartlett reached out to Jeffrey Bross, Jeffrey contacted me and said, are you still interested in doing an adoptive merge of adding another site? Because I may have something for you. And then when he mentioned him, I said, oh yeah, I've already had a conversation with him. And so then I went down and talked with the leadership in Bartlett, explained kind of what Journey of Hope was doing. They were really excited about being a part of that. And then we continued the conversation. It actually was a very quick process from beginning to end. Actually, both mergers were. Because the first merger, we started conversations basically November, December, and we merged at the end of May. And then the one out of Good Shepherd in Bartlett, we started those conversations around December, January, and then we had the final merger vote at the end of June. And so they were really quick processes. I will also say that if you have that opportunity, I know that there have been other conversations about merger processes taking 2 years. I think that is well too long. People lose interest. It's like by the time you hit a year and a half, even a year, everybody's like, we've talked about this forever. It seems like that's all we're doing is talking. We're never moving anywhere, getting anywhere forward with it. And so by doing it in 6 months, it made it really busy, but it kept everybody moving forward.
Can you give us a breakdown of who was on your merger teams? So that way we can kind of, and if it worked and if you would make recommendations.
Yeah, so what we did for the first merger was we basically pulled the 2 church councils together and had them kind of as the merger team. Sometimes that gets a little too cumbersome, gets too many people. So here's what I would suggest. I mean, I would definitely get people that are trustees, finance, overall church leadership. So if you had representations from the 4 major committees on a merger team, that would be good. But there's one other piece that I would recommend getting, and that is spiritual leadership. So a lot of times we look at church councils, finance, trustees, and they're great people. And a lot of times they do wonderful work. They're also a lot of administrators, and they know how to get the paperwork done and get things accomplished. But what you really need is spiritual leadership. And so here's what I would suggest. This was actually told to me by my clergy coach. Hand out slips of paper in your congregation on a Sunday morning, and have them write down 2 names on that slip of paper. And the 2 names that you want them to write down on that slip of paper are, if you are in a spiritual crisis right now and your pastor was not available, who would you call? And come up with 1 or 2 names of those people that you would call in a spiritual crisis if your pastor was not available. Preferably somebody from your church. So, and then what happens is when you compile all those names, you bring all those names together and you bring them, have somebody compile those names, you will notice that 1 or 2 will rise to the top. Those are your spiritual leaders in the church, and they should most definitely be on that merger team. When we did the adoptive merge with Good Shepherd, I mean, our church council chair is one of the major spiritual leaders of our church. In Good Shepherd, I wasn't sure who it was. And so I talked with some of the members and they said, well, without a doubt, Mel is. I had no idea who Mel was. Mel wasn't at any of the other meetings that we had talked about. But they had said, this is the person that needs to be on there. So I said, invite her. She needs to be on this. And what happened is that during some of those meetings, when things got so in the thick of things, into the weeds of all the administrative stuff that needs to get done, that was the moment that she spoke up. And she said, wait a minute, I think we need to take a step back and we need to recenter ourselves. Because even as pastors, I mean, we get right in the middle of it going, okay, we got to get all this stuff done. But if you have those spiritual leaders that can say, wait a minute, we're getting too deep into this. We need to take a step back. We need to take a breath. Maybe we need to spend some time in prayer, and then recenter yourselves. So it's always good to have some of those in.
Good word.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
Good.
Let's do this merge.
We're ready. Ready, set, go.
Yes, John?
Yeah, difficulties that you ran into, general ones. What were they, and how did you overcome those difficulties?
Grace, a lot of grace. But what I would say, grace and communication. I mean, making sure that everyone feels like that everybody's voice is valued at the table. That there is no dumb questions. There's no dumb opinions of saying, hey, look, this means a lot to me. Great, let's talk about that. And then how can we compromise if we can? But I think a lot of communication with the congregation. I did something really goofy during COVID. We all did a lot of really goofy things, but trying to get the information out to the congregation, because I think that's another big key is that if the congregation doesn't know what's happening, they're always going to think the worst. That they're coming in to take everything away from us. We're going to lose everything. And so I tried to get as much communication out there as I could. I created a goofy thing called the Merger Network, which was it was usually about a 10-minute video that came out every week. But I had a lot of time during COVID. So I did a little news broadcast and I introduced people to staff. I also kept them up to date on when the votes were going to happen, where the merger team was in making decisions on certain things. And so I just tried to keep them posted on everything. And so any way that, whether it's pastoral leadership that does that or church council leadership that regularly gets up in front of the congregation on Sunday mornings, writes emails to let people know where things are going, I think you'll alleviate a lot of problems if you're able to keep everybody in the loop. But yes, it is undeniable that you're going to step on somebody's toes, that somebody's going to get rubbed the wrong way. Follow the rule of Christ. Go to them, talk to them. If it takes more than one, go with more than one. But just try to keep everybody along the journey as much as you can.
Okay, thank you.
So
Yeah.
I had a question. You said that, you know, relatively speaking, yours went pretty quickly,
Yes.
which actually makes me feel better. But what my question was, so did you like wait till the paperwork was done before you started merging the congregations to worship together? Or did you, you know, did it all happen in a nice sequence, or did you kind of have, you know, start joining the worship together while you were still finishing your paperwork and your merger paperwork and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we had members from both congregations during both merges that would come and visit the other congregations, so they would go back and forth. It's really hard because yeah, you got to have the merger documents done and voted on before everything kind of becomes this merged congregation. But if there's any way that you can bring people together, whether even that's just having a potluck meal, some event where you get people together, say, hey, we want to just get together and get to know one another. That certainly eases the tension too. Because then people go, oh, I know this person, and this person, you know, introduces somebody else, and we didn't realize how many people from one congregation knew people in the other congregation. We had some from Bartlett that actually were members of Hepworth a number of years ago. But until you get people together, you know, you never really realize that. So I would, as soon as you could, start kind of whether that's a dating process, but encourage people to go to the different congregations, and just to get to know people.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, but so as a follow-up to that though, I mean, would you go ahead and start merging staff parish and trustees and just kind of start having joint meetings, even though you haven't really formally voted on your document? How long would you wait on doing the merging of committees?
Those actually, I waited until the actual official merge was done. We had the merger team that was getting together, and so you've got a lot of church leadership that are together and having conversations, and you're having members of all of those committees together already. So I would hold off on bringing all of the committees together until after the merge is finally done, because you just never know. I mean, we were like going, okay, this is all done. We realize it, but you just don't know that the day of the vote comes up and something really goes wrong. And then you kind of put the cart before the horse. But I think if you're doing the merger team meetings, that you're already getting some of that because you're bringing people together anyway.
And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a lot of overlap between those committees and the merger team.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, which is why then they can bring it back. So you've got you've got a member from trustees from both churches on that merger team. Then they can go back to the trustee teams that they have and disseminate the information and say, okay, yes, so this is kind of what we're talking about. But at least you have representation on the merger team. I will say this. So I met with a pastor about 6 months ago. And I was kind of blown away by it, because when I sat down with him, we had never met before. I didn't really know him from anyone. He had come from, I think he might have even come from the Iowa Annual Conference. But we were just kind of talking, and I mentioned some of the stuff that I've been doing with my doctorate work. So my doctorate work that I'm working on, my paper that I'm going to be doing, is the revitalization of the local church through a merger process. And when I told him the title of it, he goes, oh, those mergers, they don't work. And I said, hang on. I said, I get that mergers have gotten a bad rap, in years past. But I said, I've been a part of two that have really worked well. And I think keeping an open mind about it, because there are a lot of churches that are like all of you are talking about it and are going, hey, this has got to work. And thankfully I can speak from experience that they do work. That it takes a little bit of work, but they do work, and there can be new life, there can be new growth out of it. and God is certainly blessing it. And so I know that God will bless you in whatever direction you take. But know that merges sometimes are scary, and yes, there is grief that happens. As a quick side note, if you're moving from one church to the next and you're leaving one church building behind, be sure to have a closing worship service at that former church. Invite the district superintendent out so that they can do basically a decommissioning service for the church. Very moving services. Wesley thought they were not going to have that because it was in the midst of COVID. They said we merged and we weren't able to worship together. Our first merged worship service was online. But I said, when we get back into in person, we will go back and have a closing worship service. And we did. There was one, I don't remember who the district superintendent was, but it was a previous pastor that I talked with about his decommissioning services for a church. And he will never forget it because he said the district superintendent sat up there, and at the end of the service, some of the words that they say are, "This church is no longer a United Methodist Church building." And incredibly powerful words. But as soon as he said that, he also knocked the chalice over. So he tipped the cup over as he said it, as a symbol of what was happening. And he says that the entire place was so silent, and it was so powerful. But it helps along that grieving process, because you will have a grieving process as you move.
One last quick one.
Yes.
When you made the legal merge, did you change the name of one of the two entities to the new Journey for Hope, or did you incorporate a new, completely new entity under the new name?
The first merge, we legally closed Wesley and changed the name from Epworth to Journey of Hope.
Okay.
It was easier to do it that way, legally speaking. The Bartlett campus, that was part of a merge in process, which basically changed their name to Journey of Hope.
Gotcha.
Yes, you do need to file all kinds of paperwork with the state of Illinois, and so you definitely need an attorney to be able to fill that out. I have not talked with Dave Ackman to see what his availability is, to see if he's willing to do that for multiple churches out in the conference. But I will ask him. But depending on whether or not you have somebody already, he actually did it for both churches in both merges. That's your comfort level between the two churches. Because some churches will say, no, we want our own attorney to make sure that everything is set. But others will say, you know what, we trust you. We know you're not gonna, screw anything up. But yes, you definitely need somebody who will fill out, and actually that's some of the paperwork that I'll send too. I'll send a copy of our articles of merger that he filled out, because you can actually then take those and actually just kind of change the names and the addresses and dates. And you should be able to use most of the articles of merger in any legal filings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
right,
we're
so
coming up. Oh, go ahead. Does somebody have
no,
another question?
just good. No, turning that over to you and just say, ask if you had any further words for us, Jim.
Yeah, no, we're coming up to 8:30, so I think that's a good conclusion.
Okay.
And then, if we get to the point where we are in need of guidance or wisdom, we can always set up another call.
Absolutely.
And maybe we'll be a case study in your doctoral paper.
Ah,
Yeah, there you go. That'll be the payback, right?
there you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We
Yes.
very much appreciate it. I think that it helps kickstart us, and it helps give us hope that somebody who has successfully done this you know, that there are success stories here, and there are that God does show up. I
Yes.
think that, you know, and I think we need to keep that in mind too.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. If yeah, I mean, if anybody, I will make the recording available to the everybody else we invited, and Pastor Jarrod, if you send me the paperwork, I would distribute that stuff
Yeah.
so people can start taking a look at that stuff. But I think you've given us a lot of stuff to think about and talk about, and some motivation, hopefully, too. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Good. You are very welcome. And yes, if there's anything else that you need from me, you just reach out and let me know, and I'd love to help.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody, for showing up. We appreciate it. Have a good night. Thank you.